Right. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Suniti Devidasi. I am an initiated member of ISKCON for the last 21 years, and I am currently serving as the Administrative Director for the ISKCON North America Regional Governing Body.
And I am Prabhupada Priya Devidasi. Hare Krishna. I've been a member of ISKCON for 34 years. I've done a lot of things. I'm I've studied a lot of Shastra. I'm Bhakti Shastra degree and Bhakti Vaibhava degree, Bhakti Vedanta degree, and I'm also currently teaching the Bhakti Vedanta course for Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. I'm the educational director at Krishna House Dallas, board member, and also after completing the GBC College for Leadership Development, I was made a zonal supervisor for the state of Texas.
Thank you for joining us today. So we're here today to discuss the statement released from the Executive Committee of the GBC, released today, February 14th. And I will read the resolution to start. So the statement says, it is resolved that there should be ongoing discussion on Guru Tattva based on Srila Prabhupada's teachings and examples amongst qualified devotees in ISKCON. Details can be discussed further. 2, there should be a system to give more recognition and spiritual authority to certain qualified Siksha gurus within ISKCON. 3, qualified Vaiṣṇavīs or Vaishnavas can be recognized as these special Siksha gurus. 4, until the issue is satisfactorily resolved concerning Vaishnavi dīkṣā gurus, qualified Vaishnavīs should only be recognized as Siksha gurus, with the exception of Narayani Devidasi, who remains the dīkṣā guru of her current disciples. 5, the present committee remains open to assist in further research and discussions on the topic according to the GBC's desire. And this was issued today, February 14th, by GBC Communications.
So, I would like to make a few points and then we'll discuss together. I think there are two very serious problems in the GBC statement. And I'm speaking as a loyal member of ISKCON. I have defended for over half a century the GBC system in ISKCON. I continue to defend it. And I should also mention that I do not accuse the GBC of insincerity or I think they actually were trying their best, but that there are two very serious and very dangerous mistakes in what they did. One of the mistakes, which is stated right there, and it's actually a philosophical mistake, which contradicts Prabhupada's teachings. That philosophical mistake is the notion in their resolution that there are different qualifications for a Shiksha guru and Dīkṣā guru, so that it is, philosophically it's possible, in their view, and that I think is directly indicated in their resolution, that someone can be qualified to be a Shiksha guru, say a lady, a Vaishnavi, and yet it's not clear that that Vaishnavi is qualified to be a Dīkṣā guru. So I'm going to read from the Nectar Devotion, where Prabhupada says, also, I think it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. No, it was a class on the Nectar Devotion, October 29th, 1972, and it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, 19.151, chapter 19, text 151. Prabhupada writes, so Krishna is within as Chaitya Guru, and when we are serious, he comes out as the spiritual master, Shiksha Guru, Dīkṣā Guru. So there is no difference between Shiksha Guru and Dīkṣā Guru. Krishna manifests himself externally as a Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru. So we can hardly say that Krishna is not equal to Krishna. That would be obviously an absurd blunder in terms of spiritual logic and philosophy. So Prabhupada says, so how can a lady, let's say a Vaishnavi, be a qualified Shiksha Guru, but it's not clear if she's a qualified Diksha Guru? That contradicts Prabhupada's statement, it contradicts Shastra. Now, if we had to say that one is more important, obviously it would not be the Diksha Guru, because it's possible that one can be a competent Diksha Guru in the sense that perform an initiation ceremony and the Guru himself or herself is following the principles and everything the Diksha is done according to Prabhupada's instructions and Vaishnava culture. But it's not possible. So a person could do all that and not really be an expert in philosophy, Vaishnava philosophy. But it's not possible to be a competent Shiksha Guru and not actually understand very well the philosophy and be following the principles. So, if anything, the qualifications for a Shiksha Guru to be a good Shiksha Guru has higher qualifications than to become a qualified Diksha Guru. So, but for now, let's say they're equal. And if in any way they're not equal, it's that the Shiksha Guru actually has an extra qualification. So for the GBC to say, and we hope that the GBC makes decisions based on Shastra and based on Prabhupada's teachings. Otherwise, what are they doing? Especially if we're talking about GBC decisions regarding philosophical matters. So to say that women, we now know, or we now acknowledge that women are qualified to be Shiksha Gurus, but we cannot say they're qualified to be Diksha Gurus, that is very simply a philosophical mistake. And that's one point. So
Can I say something on that point? I've taught the ISKCON Disciples course many times, and there's a quote from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur right in the ISKCON Disciples Book Handbook, where he's saying that the Shiksha Guru is more important than the Diksha Guru. And of course, he's a case in point because his Shiksha Guru is much more important to him than his Diksha Guru. And that's why we put the Shiksha Guru and the Guru Parampara on our altars.
Interesting. In the Guru Parampara, the more important guru is the Shiksha Guru, and yet these GBC and Indian Bureau philosophers have passed a resolution which clearly indicates that the qualification is higher for a Diksha Guru. So that's not a good start. The second, and again, as I've said, or I hope I've said it, that I personally believe sincerely that the GBC members are trying to serve Prabhupada. I don't think they have bad motives. I think they're trying to keep ISKCON together. And so I'm not questioning their sincerity. I am questioning the wisdom of their resolution. There's another problem with this statement they've just made, which is, I would say, equally serious. And that is, as I've said many times, Prabhupada made very clear, he could not have made more clear, that the Gaudiya Math of his guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in its day was a very powerful, growing, potent spiritual movement. And yet it literally disintegrated. It literally disintegrated. And Prabhupada made very clear what the reason was, what destroyed the Gaudiya Math as a powerful movement representing Lord Chaitanya. What destroyed it was the failure to govern that institution through a GBC system, whatever name they used, basically a GBC system. Now, there's a very widespread perception in ISKCON. I would say in the West, it's almost, you have to look hard to find someone that doesn't think this, that in fact, the Indian Bureau is usurping GBC power. And that in fact, when the GBC voted 20 years ago, or whatever it is, to have Vaiṣṇavī dīkṣā gurus, they were acting in good faith. And the GBC has never given any evidence as to why that decision was wrong. In fact, they haven't even tried to argue that that decision was mistaken. We blundered. In fact, I'll tell you my personal view, and I want to leave time for the ladies to speak. Having been personally trained by Prabhupada as a leader in ISKCON, to me, there's no doubt, as Prabhupada himself said, that ISKCON is his body. So when someone raises a knife to Prabhupada's body and threatens to cut off a part of that body, and at the same time claims to be a Vaishnav Pandit or a follower of Prabhupada, it's very hard for me. It's very hard for me to see that person as a mature follower of Prabhupada. To raise a knife and to threaten over a detail. There is no basic injunction that a woman cannot be a guru. And again, the dīkṣā shiksha distinction is actually not important here. Or if it is, it favors the shiksha. So to threaten Prabhupada's body with a knife and to claim that you are saving ISKCON is, I think the point is clear. So I want to give two historical examples where, in fact, the GBC could not act properly. And I was on the GBC then, that the GBC could not act properly. And it was actually the second level of leaders, temple presidents, and some sannyasis who saved ISKCON from a very serious threat when the GBC could not or would not act. One case was when there were the so-called zonal acharyas, and I was one of them, but actually no one brought a serious attack on my zone because it was going well. But the general performance was very problematic. And the GBC, and I don't think the GBC, including myself, I don't think we were unfaithful or just ambitious. We were in uncharted waters. We never dealt with a situation like this. And so the GBC, and there were some people on the GBC, to be honest, I won't mention their names, who were really dragging their feet. And so finally it came to a crisis. And the closest, perhaps until now, that ISKCON ever came to some people committing the greatest betrayal of Prabhupada, and that is to cut his body. And so we had an emergency GBC meeting. I spoke very strongly, and the guru system was changed. But it was driven not by the GBC. The GBC was sort of forced to act and empowered to act, in a sense, by this revolt of secondary leaders or leaders beneath the GBC level. So that's an example where the GBC could not fix a very dangerous situation, but they were forced to fix it because of other leaders in ISKCON. The second case is when Narayan Swami was quite transparently trying to take over ISKCON. He gave a very famous, notorious talk in Vrindavan on the Sannyas Day of Lord Chaitanya's brother, older brother, and in which there were, quite a few or several very important philosophical mistakes, which I won't go into here. And there were some ISKCON leaders, some of the top leaders on the GBC, who were going to Narayan, sitting at his feet, and taking him as practically like a Shiksha guru. And meanwhile, these most senior leaders were taking as a Shiksha guru was actually had certain ambitions, which I think were very unhealthy. And so at that time, it was an uprising of the temple presidents again and sannyasis. The GBC, whatever, for whatever reason, which I don't think they were just, I'm not saying they were corrupt, they didn't know what to do because these were very serious senior GBC members. It was they were forced to act by the temple president, sannyasis, other leaders, and they did the right thing, and ISKCON was saved. So in this case, there is precedent in ISKCON history. Ironically, the people who oppose Vaishnavi Diksha gurus simply brush away many statements by Prabhupada, many historical examples, and many examples in Shastra, even in the Vedas. And so basically all the pillars of evidence are there, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And Prabhupada said to do it. And Prabhupada said that GBC should decide these things. And so a group of people are attempting quite transparently, it's not that they're hiding the fact, and they have, well, unfortunately for them, revealed their actual intentions to people who are loyal to ISKCON, have reported their intentions. And so they're basically threatening ISKCON. So the ISKCON will not be ruled in Prabhupada's system by GBC. It'll be ruled by a gang in India. And I think, the worst perpetrator is not even Indian. So I'm not blaming this on the Indians. But they will be ruled by this oligarchy who have already taken a veto power. Because there were other issues in the last several years where the GBC decided something and the Indian Bureau didn't like it, and so vetoed GBC resolutions. So what we're talking about is an open, naked attempt to usurp the power that Prabhupada gave to the GBC, to violate Prabhupada's will, and themselves to become the ultimate managing authority of ISKCON. They do this by threats, and it's sort of like a mafia, in my humble opinion. And so the real simple question here is, will we follow Prabhupada? Will the GBC actually decide what they already decided 20 years ago? Or will they be bullied into allowing a small group of extreme devotees who ignore Prabhupada's direct instructions, ignore historical examples, ignore Shastra, and they will actually decide the direction of ISKCON? So to me, that's what's at stake here. Again, I don't think the GBC is, I think they're trying to do their best. I don't think they're bad people. I think they're trying to serve Prabhupada. I understand why they want to do everything or at all costs avoid, cutting Prabhupada's body, even though these people are holding a knife to Prabhupada's body and demanding that Prabhupada's will be violated and they become the ultimate decision makers for the Hare Krishna movement. So this is I suppose you could call it a crisis. I'm not the head of the GBC. I'm a GBC emeritus, and I respect the GBC. They're the ones that have to make the right decision, but they do have to make the right decision. So I will stop here and invite these senior Krishna conscious ladies to give their views.
Thank you. It was very enlightening and moving. I was thinking in this regard that in terms of an analogy, you use the word usurping, hijacking. It's just like, an aircraft being hijacked by terrorists. If the managerial captain of the ship is supposed to be the GBC, according to Srila Prabhupada's very clear, direct statement. And yet, this other group has come in and basically threatened the captain, pushed him aside, bound and gagged him, and taken over. And now their intention is to take the movement, take ISKCON into a direction that is not the direction that Srila Prabhupada wanted it to go in. Just like terrorists will take the aircraft off course and crash it, into something. So, and Madhavananda Prabhu posted something. I'll just read what he posted because I thought it was very interesting. He said, if a group of institutional leaders decree by vote that regardless of spiritual qualification, simply on the basis of one's material body, that one can or cannot be a guru, then such a sangha will become an upasampradaya. So, yeah, the effect of this hijacking is that ISKCON is becoming an upasampradaya. Your comments on that?
Well, Suniti, would you like to?
No, go ahead.
I like the hijacking analogy. I think that it would be interesting to ask the India Bureau if they are prepared to follow the GBC direction, since Prabhupada put the GBC in charge of ISKCON and said, even if you disagree with the GBC decision, you must follow it, and then, of course, you can lobby or work to change it. Another argument that's given that perhaps I can address is that when making legal arrangements for temples, and I know because I was one of my best friends, Amarendra Prabhu, for many years was one of the most important lawyers in the Hare Krishna movement. He's the one that saved ISKCON in the Robin George case, and he was intimately involved in this whole issue of registering ISKCON properties, because in different countries there are different laws, and so it can be a very delicate matter. How do you, in a particular country, how do you put an organization in that country under the legal control of people in another country? So as you can imagine, especially in countries who were colonies of first world countries, that can be an extremely sensitive matter. And one such country is India. So because of these unique and sort of very delicate situation in India, Prabhupada made some legal arrangements where the India Bureau would not, in certain legal documents, be under, let's say, the control of other ISKCON leaders, GBC, in other countries like America and Europe. And India, is very sensitive about having Indian things under the control of their former colonizers. Now, that's being interpreted falsely by the usurpers. That is being interpreted as meaning that Prabhupada did not want his temples, his movement in India, to be under the international GBC, which is absurd. In fact, when Prabhupada dictated his last will and testament, he did not say the entire ISKCON, except for India, that the GBC shall be the ultimate managing authority for the entire ISKCON, except for India. Do we have a quote somewhere from Prabhupada where he's not discussing technical legal matters, where he just says, I want India to be sort of like the Vatican? It's just like the Vatican, the small area, is not under the control of Italian law. Or like, for example, an embassy. Technically, an embassy, property inside the embassy, is legally, by international law, under the control of the country of origin. So do we have a series of statements from Prabhupada outside legal discussions, technical legal discussions, saying that I am establishing ISKCON so the GBC will be the ultimate managing authority for all of ISKCON, but not of India. India, for, let's say, not technical legal documents, but India, for the general management of ISKCON, shall not be under the GBC. It is independent of the GBC. It is autonomous. The GBC body cannot pass resolutions about India. This idea is absurd. So there are a series of absurd arguments when I remember when I was working with the GBC and Amarendra, so that all of our properties all around the world could not be usurped, could not be stolen. That was one of Prabhupada's greatest fears, and it was a very rational fear that devotees working hard, selling his books, collecting money, buying properties, and some local renegade come along and steal the properties, which often are worth a lot of money. So therefore, in obedience to Prabhupada, and Amarendra, who was one of the main lawyers, can verify everything I'm saying. Therefore, to avoid that happening, because that's exactly what happened to the Gaudiya Math, by the way. So to avoid that happening, Prabhupada, the GBC years ago, worked on this project so that the GBC is the ultimate managing authority, would be the ultimate managing authority, in fact, not just theoretically. Because if there's a community, a temple and property and all that, and the GBC is totally powerless, how will they be the ultimate managing authority? So every country in the world, over 100 countries, every country in the world in ISKCON agreed, except India. So for some time now, the leaders of India have been flirting with rejecting Prabhupada's orders. And I don't mean all the temple presidents in India, many of whom are wonderful devotees. I don't mean GBCs like H.D.Goswami, Gopal Krishna, who were the most important leaders spiritually in India. They were absolutely in agreement with what I'm saying. But there's a generation of leaders who never actually were recognized by Prabhupada as leaders. None of them. Not one person who was behind this coup, this usurpation, not one of them was ever recognized by Prabhupada as a senior leader, to be trusted as a senior leader. Not one of them. So
can I pose an argument here?
Yeah, please.
So someone could say that any individual or body, a group of devotees, has a right to attempt to influence the GBC in their decision making.
Of course.
So you could say that this body, they very heavily influence the GBC in its decision making. They didn't make the vote. They're not voting members.
There's a difference between rational influence, making your case. That's one thing. Another thing is extortion. Another thing is threatening. That's mafia tactics. Like, it won't be good for your health if you don't do this. One is civilized and Krishna conscious. The other is just thuggery. It's raising a knife to Prabhupada's body. So let's not confuse one thing, which is perfectly Krishna conscious. For example, let's say there are conservative devotees in ISKCON who believe that women shouldn't initiate for whatever reason. They're not threatening anybody. They're just voicing their view. They have a right to do that. We're not talking about them. We're not talking about devotees who are simply speaking their conscience and trying to persuade other devotees, including the leaders, that this is better for ISKCON. They have a God-given, Prabhupada-given right to do that. No one's questioning that. We're talking about mafia tactics. We're talking about people who are threatening to betray Prabhupada's system, threatening to destroy Prabhupada's system. That's what we're talking about.
Big difference.
It's the difference between criminal and legal behavior.
You know, the same body uses a lot of intimidation tactics on the Indian leaders themselves. Because I was at a conference, International Temple Presidents meeting, and I was sitting at a table, this was a couple of years ago, with a table full of ISKCON temple presidents, Indian temple presidents. And they were actually venting their frustration at how, you know, they would be trying to lead their communities, build their congregations, manage their centers. And then the Indian Bureau would sweep in and basically just overturn their decisions, you know, issue their edicts about this has to be like this has to be like that, this person has to be in this position, and just you know, micromanage the whole thing.
Yeah,
And these
that is
educated, competent
yeah.
leaders are just disempowered.
That is absolutely in violation of Prabhupada's many clear instructions. These people are not followers of Prabhupada. The way that, at least in that behavior. Maybe they follow Prabhupada and other things, but not in this. You could make a very large collection of Prabhupada's statements, slamming that, rejecting that, saying that will ruin ISKCON.
Mhm.
In fact, I will read you one right now, if I can find it very quick. Let's see. Okay, found it. I'm going to read a quote from Prabhupada, and you will see how this thuggery, this intimidation, this, in so many ways, they reject Prabhupada's teachings, and yet they claim to be keeping ISKCON pure. Here's a quote from Prabhupada. This is a letter to, let's see, what's the source? Letter from, anyway, Vani quotes. It would be nice if they, okay, here it is. Letter to Kurandar, who was temple president in GBC in Los Angeles, from Bombay, 22nd of December, 1972. I have heard from Jayatirtha you want to make big plan for centralization of management. I do not at all approve of such a plan. Do not centralize anything. India Bureau. Each temple must remain independent and self-sufficient. That was my plan from the very beginning. Why are you thinking otherwise? Once before, you wanted to do something centralizing with your GBC meeting, or India Bureau in this case, and if I did not interfere, the whole thing would have been killed. Do not think in this way of big corporation, big credit, centralization. These are all nonsense proposals. Only thing I wanted was that book printing and distribution should be centralized. Otherwise, management, everything should be done locally by local men. And then here's a quote. Krishna consciousness movement is for training men, in this context, especially temple presidents, to be independently thoughtful and competent in all types of departments of knowledge and action, not for making bureaucracy. And then you'll see what Prabhupada means here by bureaucracy. Once there is bureaucracy, the whole thing will be spoiled. Now, here's what he means by bureaucracy. There must be always individual striving and work and responsibility, competitive spirit, not that one shall dominate and distribute benefits to the others, and they do nothing but beg from you and you provide. No. So these people are not following Prabhupada. They don't respect Prabhupada's GBC. They don't respect Prabhupada's many clear statements about local autonomy. These are not people faithfully following Prabhupada. What faithful follower of Prabhupada would raise a knife to his body and threaten to cut Prabhupada's body? What Vaiṣṇava, what follower of Prabhupada would ever say such a thing? So I think it's come to a time where the GBC, again, I think they're sincere devotees. I think they are really trying to do their best. I'm not against them. They are, I may not always think they're very competent, but they're legitimate. They are the legitimate managing authority of ISKCON. And we must insist that they do their job.
Yeah.
Suniti, did you want to comment?
Yes, you mentioned previously we have a historic precedence within ISKCON for when the GBC was, going astray and leaders getting them back on track. What we have now is a group, a region that is really going astray and trying to influence, coerce the GBC. So this is a little bit different than the historic precedents we had before.
I would say not in this sense. I mean, I understand there's obviously differences. I mean, as you stated it.
Mhm.
But the difference is, from what Prabhupada Priya just said, is that it's not that in that region, which is India, that all the local leaders, temple presidents, are happy with this coercion and deviation and usurpation. And so actually what we need to do is communicate with those people. Because actually it's not a region. It's a small group of mafiosos who actually, they've even said this because unfortunately they revealed some of their plans to someone who's not really with them, who then revealed it to us. In the past, they have a very clear plan to take over ISKCON. They absolutely want to dictate to the GBC. They will continue to threaten the GBC. Anytime they don't agree with the GBC resolution, the knives will come out again. So I have faith in the GBC leaders. I'm sorry, in the GBC, the temple presidents in India. Because, the greatest leaders in the history of ISKCON India, people like Gopal Krishna Goswami, Jayapataka Swami, and others, absolutely agree with me. And so if their disciples are faithful followers of their gurus, they will support Prabhupada and ISKCON and not the mafia. In fact, I think it's about time they made their voices heard. They should not either actively or passively, perhaps, aid and abet people who would not hesitate to destroy Prabhupada's system. And that must be made very clear to them. They're not under these mafia leaders. They're under Prabhupada. And they are only under living people today to the extent those people follow Prabhupada. No temple president in India, no one in any country has any spiritual obligation to follow someone who is raising a knife to Prabhupada's body. There's no such obligation. In fact, Prabhupada would be disgusted with a temple president who did not defend him, who did not defend his system, who did not defend his teachings, such as that women can be gurus.
I know some devotees are going to be thinking that, okay, Prabhupada wanted us to follow the GBC, but if the GBC has been taken over by this mafia and has become the mouthpiece of the mafia, then it seems we should not follow the GBC in the current situation.
Okay, there's a sort of, I don't think it's so subtle, but there's a distinction here. There is something called civil disobedience. And civil disobedience is not the same as revolution. It's not a revolution where like in the French Revolution, where you cut the king's head off or something. This is not an anti-GBC argument that we're making. We are not saying, okay, the GBC, you can't do it, we'll do it. Rather, we are bringing transparently pressure, and we should bring more and more pressure on the GBC until they do their job. We are demanding that the GBC lead ISKCON, not demanding that they be kicked out.
So it's kind of empowering the GBC to do what they know they need to do by boosting them from the ground up.
Yeah, and that's how the many of the most important changes in ISKCON history, that's how they were made. This is not unprecedented. That's how let's say, a more enlightened guru system was established. That's how ISKCON was saved by a rather naked attempt to usurp authority in ISKCON before, in the case of a, so-called Gaudiya Math guru, so-called Gaudiya Math, because the Gaudiya Math didn't really approve him either. And so, yes, and those attempts, demanding that certain the biggest ISKCON leaders not play into the hands of someone who was not really acting in the best interest of Prabhupada, demanded that it stop. They were that, and in the case of the other case I mentioned, so it's demanding that the GBC lead ISKCON properly, not demanding that they be removed as leaders.
Mhm. Yeah, because as you said, the GBC are all, sincere devotees, and they're just trying to save ISKCON from splitting, which is what the threat. And they're thinking, well, if we just agree, if we just cooperate, then we can at least keep the movement together. But the more they submit and, take the passive role in this, the more they give, the more the other group is going to take. It's not going to work. They have to stand up and push back.
Yes. So, Niti, did you?
Yeah. Well, so I think that is the question then for the individual devotees, as Prabhupada Priya mentioned. There's been devotees all over who feel like they can no longer tolerate this. How do they go about doing what you're saying to empower the GBC to do what they need to do to put this, pressure? How
Right.
you're the average devotee that's out there that's feeling discouraged, that's feeling like I can't tolerate this. I'm just going to leave ISKCON. How do they instead actually make it heard to the GBC? How
Yes.
how do they make their voice heard? And
I think that every sincere follower of Prabhupada, up to the first step, is to recognize very clearly, clear-eyed, no nonsense, no diplomatic, useless language. Whereas, that's forget that. And devotees should communicate with each other. Devotees who are in ISKCON today, whatever generation you are, whoever whatever generation guru you have, this is your chance to do what your predecessors have done, and that is to save ISKCON from an existential threat. This is an existential threat to Prabhupada's body. And now is your chance to, frankly, go down in history as heroes, as people that did what devotees did in the past. Devotees, some of them, what they did before you were even born. And that is, they stood up for ISKCON, they stood up for Prabhupada against this existential threat to ISKCON by a mafia, almost all of whom are actually not even Indians. These are not devotees from a Hindu background. These are Western people. And they even, it's very ironic that they kind of play this card, sort of because in India now there's a whole wave with Modi and everything, who I like actually, but there's this whole wave of like, sort of transcending the colonial past. No one's ever going to push India around again. And so you have these colonial Western devotees who are not even Indians trying to play that card, like stand up for Bharata, when in fact, they're just Western manipulators.
They're the ones subjugating Bharat.
Yeah, just have these Western people subjugating Bharata by playing this card, don't stand up. They're the colonialists. Because the Indian leaders, the temple presidents, left to their own, would never raise a knife to Prabhupada's body. It's the usurpers who are not even Indian.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important to communicate with this temple presidents in India, so they know exactly what's happening, what's at stake, and who the mafia is. And it's not even Indian.
Mhm.
They're the neo-colonialists.
They're
So,
disguising themselves as Indianized, but
no, it's a
something twisted
yeah,
about
just
it.
because you can talk with an Indian accent or say a few words in Hindi, doesn't mean that you're not a rogue. So, I think we have to reach out to every loyal member of ISKCON, every true follower of Prabhupada to understand this poison for what it is. This is one of the most poisonous, vile threats to Prabhupada's body in the history of ISKCON. And if you don't, and someone doesn't see it that way, just has their eyes closed.
So, what are some practical things that the Indian leaders, temple presidents, and just any devotees can do
They should
to
communicate.
resist this?
Yeah, communication is the key. They need to communicate with each other. They need to talk to each other in a free, independent atmosphere where they don't have one of these mafia men standing over them. That's what the temple presidents did before. When ISKCON was threatened before, in those days, of course, there were many more temples in the West. The temple presidents rose up and they demanded that the GBC do what was best for ISKCON. And so it's time for the, I mean, Indian temple presidents, they all have cell phones, they all have email addresses, they have telephones. They need to communicate with each other and they need to understand what's going on and how they're being exploited as pawns, unwillingly in many cases, to satisfy the dark ambitions of these Western invaders who simply want to control ISKCON. And that's what needs to happen. And I think at this point, there's no use mincing words. If it, like they say, like philosophers say, if it looks like a dog, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. And so, if it looks like usurping, if it looks like violating Prabhupada's system, if it looks like threatening and bullying, then that's what it is. So, and the women, I mean, my God, I have my nefarious project called Krishna West, which I don't know how many births I'll have to take, for starting a movement which strictly obeys Prabhupada to revive Western preaching. So, and it wouldn't exist without the women leaders. They're not falling down. They're not weak-minded. They're not, they're actually very strong, intelligent Vaishnavīs. And they're doing amazing preaching. They're doing amazing preaching work and, rendering, and not only the people that work with me, my God, you know, there's so many glorious women in this movement doing powerful devotional service. They're not falling down. They're not weak. They're very strong. I think the weak ones are the men who are succumbing to their own vile ambition and threatening Prabhupada's body. That's weakness.
Mhm.
So, anything else? If not, we don't want to go on too long. The time is
Now, what
yes.
about if, in the name of civil disobedience, uh, one or more of these qualified Vaishnavis, who may have aspiring disciples and has been giving shiksha to those disciples for years, um, just decides to go ahead and start initiating?
That's interesting, isn't it? That's real civil disobedience. I would say that would be a really good point to meet about. So no, seriously, and I don't just mean to talk them off the ledge. I would say that like women who feel that Krishna wants them to do this devotional service, and there are women like that, and they don't just have material desires. If a lady, Vaishnavi, feels that Krishna is encouraging her to do this, then we should actually form a group. We should talk, we should discuss these points, and we will move forward. We will find a way to move forward. And I've
Because the GBC did approve it. It's only due to the threat that they backed down,
yes,
but
exactly.
they didn't rescind. The approval is still there.
Yeah.
All the research was done, the Shastric Advisory Council, decades of research, and the conclusion was that the
Yeah.
GBC made a decision.
Right.
So therefore, these like whereas statements, with all due respect to the GBC, because I really think they're sincere. But all these whereas things, we're going to further discuss it seriously. I mean, I would advise the GBC not to pass resolutions with language that just makes people roll their eyes.
Mhm.
That just, everyone just like it makes the GBC look very bad to say absurd things like we need more discussion.
It's pathetic to think that after all these years, they don't understand Guru Tattva enough to know who can initiate.
I
I
think
mean,
they
Guru
do.
Tattva,
I think they do understand. And again, I think they are sincerely, I would
it's just
say,
the pressure.
yeah, I don't think it's a wise decision, but I think it's a sincere decision. And I recognize the GBC as legitimate authority of ISKCON. I'm not going to, lower myself to the level of this mafia.
Mhm.
Prabhupada did give instructions. The GBC is the authority. And any woman who thinks that Krishna wants me to be a guru, I'd be happy to talk to her because there are ways to do these things, which don't. And so,
Right.
any other points? Suniti, Prabhupada Priya?
Just to say that you mentioned earlier that threatening to leave ISKCON is taking a knife to Prabhupada's body and cutting it apart. And
Especially, yeah, especially when you're not just saying, I personally will leave, but you're
Right.
threatening to, uh, you know, and here's one more point, and I know you want to say something else, and that is that for those who are disgusted, and there are a lot of disgusted Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis right now, I would say the stupidest thing we can do is to abandon Prabhupada when he most needs us. I worked enough with Prabhupada as a leader to know that in a situation like this, Prabhupada would say to me and he would say to you, do not leave me and turn my society over to these people.
Mhm.
I need you more than ever to fight for my interest as the founder Acharya. So this is the worst possible time to leave Prabhupada. You can say, well, no, I'm still with Prabhupada. Not if you leave ISKCON, you do not have the same relationship with Prabhupada that you did before. I know that's a very popular thing. Yes, I didn't abandon Prabhupada. I just left ISKCON. And we know there's a very famous conversation between Prabhupada and Siddha Swarupananda in Honolulu, where, and in fairness to Siddha Swarupananda, he was being treated badly by some bad GBCs. So he had legitimate grievances. And so he came into Prabhupada's room in Honolulu and he said to Prabhupada that I accept you, Prabhupada, but I don't accept ISKCON. And Prabhupada said, that's not possible. This is all in Veda base. Prabhupada said, that's not possible because I'm a member of ISKCON. So then he said, well, I accept ISKCON, but not the GBC. And Prabhupada said, well, no, because that's the way I set things up. Again, in fairness to Siddha Swarupananda, he was being badly treated. And I'm very sympathetic to that fact that he was really disgusted by that. But when leaders in ISKCON failed to do the right thing, and to be honest, I was on the GBC when the GBC failed to do the right thing. So I'm not putting myself above the current GBC. But when the GBC failed to do the right thing, that means Prabhupada needs us more than ever. Why would you abandon Prabhupada when he most needs you? So that means you're putting yourself, okay, I'm disgusted, so I'm going to do what makes me feel good. Why not do what makes Prabhupada feel good? Do you think it makes Prabhupada feel good if there's this threat from a mafia, small group of Western devotees in India, and when Prabhupada's body and his mission is being threatened, and you walk away and leave Prabhupada at the mercy of these people? So this is a time more than ever to fight for Prabhupada and ISKCON, not to abandon Prabhupada.
So I was saying this even just the threat of cutting apart Prabhupada's body like this is a poison to Prabhupada's body. It is poison to ISKCON. And yeah, to your point of us needing to stay here and work, we need to work to get that poison out and make
Yes.
Prabhupada's body healthy again. Yes.
And I would say the Indian temple presidents, who I think are some of the nicest devotees in the movement. I mean, my experience with, because I'm the poster boy for Krishna West, but I've had a lot of dealings with Indian devotees in India and also in America, and they're really very, very nice, sincere, good devotees. I would say almost always in all my dealings with these devotees, Indian temple presidents, to me, they've been very kind, generous, hospitable, and not just temple presidents, even just congregation members. So I have nothing but praise for these Indian devotees or devotees from a Hindu background, wherever they live. And so now is your chance. In a sense, look at what Krishna is giving these Indian leaders, not the mafia, but the regular Indian leaders. Krishna's giving you a chance to show that you, the community of Prabhupada's followers in India, are glorious devotees. That they're not followers of this or that, mafia member. They're followers of Prabhupada. This is your chance to stand up and take the glory that Krishna's offering you. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, Krishna says, Jitva Shatrun Yashod Labaswa. Be my instrument. Take the glory. Earn the glory. Yashod Labaswa. That's what it means literally. And so I think it's a chance for the leaders in India, temple presidents, to show the world, the ISKCON world, all over the world, that you are powerful, loyal followers of Prabhupada. And that you don't just bow down to false leaders. Other temple presidents, other leaders in the past have done this, and they've saved ISKCON. Now's your chance. So don't think for a second that you're pleasing Prabhupada or just being, a Vinita Vaiṣṇava, a humble Vaishnava, by following people who are acting against Prabhupada and threatening his body. That's my request to you.
So what about leaders or gurus or even GBC members who don't want to speak out against the Indian Bureau or against all of this?
Fine.
Because they're afraid of getting in trouble. Maybe they're afraid that they will be exposed in some way.
Okay, well, whatever. Everyone has to decide what they're going to do. And I would say if there are Indian GBCs or other leaders in India, wherever they come from, that for whatever reason are shy to do the right thing for Prabhupada, then it doesn't matter. There are more than enough excellent, sincere followers of Prabhupada in India to stop this existential threat to Prabhupada and his mission. So if some leader, is not going to stand up publicly, whatever. Obviously, people who are Indian, were born in India, and who are leaders in India, they are free to do the right thing. And they're enough. That it's sufficient. There should be enough good, loyal Prabhupada followers in India, more than enough, to stop this attempt to usurp GBC power and to take over ISKCON.
What would they stand up and say? Would they stand up and say that those who have posed threats to split from ISKCON need to step down from their positions?
I think the first thing they would say is that I am a follower of Prabhupada. He is the founder Acharya. Prabhupada told us the GBC is the ultimate managing authority. And if the GBC sees that these toothless tigers, these traitors, if the GBC sees that they can do the right thing and vote what they really believe is true without seriously damaging ISKCON, then hopefully they'll do so.
Okay, so if the Indian leaders assure the GBC that whatever these people say, we are not leaving ISKCON.
Yes.
So their
Then,
threats are basically empty because what are two
exactly.
people going to do? Of course, if they're in control of the Indian Bureau, they do have real power. I mean, all the properties, the accounts, everything as far as I understand are in the name of the Bureau.
Well, hopefully they're not that shameless to threaten Prabhupada's properties. And anyway, I think that can be dealt with. That's a question,
Legal issue.
yeah, the legal issue for the legal ministers and so on.
Mhm.
But ISKCON cannot be governed by a small mafia that whenever who holds a veto power over the GBC.
Mhm.
That's not Prabhupada's system. That itself is a complete betrayal of Prabhupada's system.
Yeah, Prabhupada was very clear. The GBC should be the ultimate managerial authority. There should be no authority over the GBC.
Yes. So I think we've covered the points, and I take this very seriously. Prabhupada trusted me to obviously speak out if I thought there was a real threat to ISKCON, which there is. And I've said it many times in this talk. I'll say it one last time. I think the GBC members I think they're actually trying their best. I think they're trying to protect ISKCON. But in a sense, we have to organize and become so powerful, including Indian leaders especially, so that the GBC sees that they can do the right thing, they can defend Prabhupada, not give away their authority without significant harm to ISKCON.
It's almost like the GBC passed the resolution under duress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, if some of these people say no, then here's a very easy way to test that. They should all take a pledge. All these, people, these mafia members, they should all take a pledge that no matter what the GBC decides, we will accept it. We will remain loyal to ISKCON. We make no threats. We will simply continue to argue our case in a way that Prabhupada authorized. Let them declare that. Let them sign a statement saying that if the GBC does decide to authorize, Vaiṣṇavī dīkṣā gurus, then we disagree, but we will do what Prabhupada said. If you disagree with the GBC decision, you follow it anyway, and then you work and try to persuade people to change it. So are they willing to follow that instruction of Prabhupada?
And if they're not willing to say that whatever happens, they'll work under the GBC, that basically means they're not members of ISKCON.
Exactly.
So why are we letting people who are not even members of ISKCON decide what ISKCON does?
Exactly. So, Prabhupada Priya, Suniti, thank you very much for this discussion. I've tried, however imperfectly, to do my duty to Prabhupada, speak the truth, and to defend Prabhupada's actual interests.
Jai
So,
Prabhupada.
thank you very much, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
So much. Jai Prabhupada.